Well, hello there, everyone. Here, show you the Jaycee Dugard. It's like your best friends, as I talk say with Diane Sawyer, known about that you talk about right here, also known as like for grade A plus, and knowing about that if we're going to be in school that those particular grades as well. If most of us are familiar with like A, B, and C, and for like 70 and 80, 90% being a higher score, something like that. If we're talking about subjects like if it's a history, math, social studies, English, those type of subjects. But on your hand, with this activity right here is talking right here is about the best friends. And if most of us know about if we've ever read about is like in the book, it's like for Jaycee Dugard and Still Alive, I know about being a young school kid, and then from whenever she was taken, and then from whenever she was found, it is, and just knowing about that they have right here is that knowing about the whole purpose about best friends, is that knowing about the whole purpose about for best friends. So as you have right here is knowing if it's either Saturday evening, it is it's like for afternoon at knowing by 11:49, it's like a.m. and knowing about for August the 22nd, and knowing that would be see for day Saturday, but knowing about for like for whenever she was found is like that would have been around August the 26th, if I remember that if I remember right, that would have been like a Monday or Tuesday or something like that, back in 2009, I think it was, whenever she was discovered, but whenever she was found. But anyway, but knowing about that you have right here are these sketches right here, as I went ahead and you right here, these pictures, I guess, that these drawings, and knowing that I could have, I could more likely put more work, it's like if I would have spent more time with it, of course, but you have right here are these examples right here of for Diane Sawyer, and then Jaycee Dugard, and then knowing about that you have right here is like for your Diane Sawyer, and knowing about, I'm like, yeah, that for who's considered like what you call is like for best friends, is knowing that yeah, I didn't look at the spelling for the name, like for how they're spelled, but on your hand too, that right there, say could be example right there, for Diane Sawyer, and knowing that for examples of what you call for best friends is if most of us have like somebody that we know and trust, consider like say a best friend, but they may say him like some that may say that it's not recommended to have them, especially that if it's on a job or school related, knowing about somebody that you just talked to or somebody like that, but just knowing about that if these best friends, if a definition for best friends, if it could be somebody who is not related to you, but then you are pretty close. I'm like, I guess it's all about I guess it's all about the fact about that maybe not that TV show Friends, but let's just say it's a matter of fact about that if you're pretty close to somebody to where that you're almost like aunt and niece, or niece, if it's niece, or if it's cousins, or if it's mother daughter, or if it's anybody else, is knowing that if you're pretty close to somebody, even though if you may not be related, and that knowing about for other say key definitions for like you say for knowing about that with best friends, though, is that the whole part about it's like for trust, is knowing about that I can go ahead and explain a little bit more, like just by what you call drawing like say like a symbol, knowing about if you have right here is like is a circle. Go ahead and draw like maybe like a C as a circle. One part, somebody has one part of the circle, and then the other person, it's like for C in reverse. You have right here is like for C in reverse, and I'm like, yeah, that looks like a little bit wider. I'm like, but anyway, you have right there is a circle right there, and then knowing about the whole purpose about is like for trust, and knowing about is that the whole purpose about like I can go ahead and draw say more part, just like these arrows, I guess, if you want to call them, give them like the circle kind of like these arrows. But anyway, but you have right there is knowing about, it's like the whole purpose about with trust though, is that knowing that the whole trust of the relationship, between two people, knowing about with the whole purpose about whenever that with two connections though, that you say wisdom, the whole meaning about for best friends is knowing that that I went ahead and drew right here, is I'll go ahead and use right here as the black pencil, but I can go ahead and add in. I'm like, yeah, if I want to go ahead and maybe add kind of call them like maybe some strokes or something like that. But anyway, I don't have too much updated info knowing about. I'm like, yeah, that with these images, I'm sure with these drawings that they can maybe show a little bit more better improvements. But on your hand, that just showing examples right here, if I talk about, say, for best friends, is knowing that for if we're going to be at school or on a job, a lot of times is knowing about that for who we consider to be best friends, even though if this other person that they ask a few questions about you, as in that they're extremely curious, and then as well as knowing about that. That hey, that I'm interested in your research, or that if it's anything about that what you're doing, and as well as that you look cute in that picture or something like that. So far as pretty as the picture, but let's just say though that I'm like, yeah, that knowing about that with friends though, that the difference between best friends and then just friends, and knowing about, I'm like, yeah, that really about, if we were to think about this, is like that. Other than that TV show Friends, knowing about, has there been a TV show called Best Friends? I'm like, just for those two words for best friends, and knowing about with these friends though, that somebody who more likely that goes, I say, for two and one, but other than that, like talking about right here, for two people, knowing about, or if it could be maybe a group of 5 or 10 people, knowing about for the best of groups, but. On your hand too, that I guess that basically means is like somebody that knows you well, and then understands it, and then understands you well. You get along with them very well, and knowing about is, I guess it's all measured, knowing about that how well you trust them, and how well that you get along with them. You pretty much, they say that you pretty much are attended to them, and most of the time, and maybe not every time, but that knowing about the whole key definition for is like the meaning for best friends is that somebody who more likely that cares about you a lot, and then knowing that whole purpose, I guess, is like knowing about that you are not alone, and knowing about that according from what I understand about the book though, is that knowing about part of the story that I can read is like reading about for Jaycee Dugard, is that talking is that the times for whenever she was lonely, and then whenever she was scared, that type of stuff, and knowing about that for like best friends though, is that knowing about that sometimes that I'm sure that some people may think that that really about for a whole purpose about for like having a best friend is that knowing that hey, that there will be somebody there standing by your side, or that there may be a situation to where that they got busy doing something else. Let's just say that if the situation were to come to where that you need help with homework, but then somebody else says that they're too busy to help you with it, that type of stuff. But knowing about what we call like to where friends, so people that you talk to, and then maybe that they don't take the time to talk to you in case that there's something urgent that's going on, that type of stuff. And knowing about for a definition for us, like for best friends. So, and you have right here, it's like if it's talking about as a story like for Jaycee Dugard, and knowing about, I'm like, yeah, that the way I drew this picture right here is that that normally that the pictures that that she would be wearing like say a black or same flowered skirt or something like that, a few other types of gowns and dresses that more likely that I know that more likely would look good on her portrait though, and then along with Diane Sawyer though. But on their hand, I'm like, well, I'm just trying to get to a point here to where that that they say for best friends is knowing about that really about for what we think that who best friends are. are these, friends, these people, I'm like knowing about the trusted relationship and knowing about how they met, and then knowing about how they've been together since then, such as which calls like trusted people, and knowing that really is it recommended to meet somebody online, or if it's maybe that you write a letter and then to somebody, and then somebody else returns it, and then that somebody else, you become best friends with them. If they return something that may belong to you, or that's some certain someone, and then it's like you become best friends later on. So it's like the whole purpose about is knowing about that I guess I can go ahead and say that if we can understand about, if we, somebody that, some of us that may say that, yeah, you've had best friends before, but a lot of times it seems like that sometimes that this type of person to where that they're only friends with you for about maybe 2 or 3 years, and then after that, and then they decide to go ahead and become friends with somebody else, or that they seem like that they're using you, manipulating you, or something like that, and then they just they want to take advantage of you, that type of stuff. But knowing about whole trust relationship about friends, though, is I can go ahead and draw right here, is knowing about that a type of person to where they care about you, and knowing about that there ain't nothing on the from the face of this earth that more likely that can harm you, and knowing that they'll do whatever it takes to protect the privacy and your evidence from related to that person, such as if somebody goes missing, such as I'm like, yeah, that can mother and daughter be best friends, and I'm saying, yeah, that knowing about, even though if they are related, that you have it to where that talking about it's like for best friends relationship is knowing that for somebody who cares about you, to where if one of these days if you do wind up going missing, and knowing about, I'm like, yeah, that well, you can get another friend, you can you don't need to look after them all the time, that type of stuff. But let's just say though that if the situation were to be like to where that this friend, this friend that and I can tell anybody here that for many years I've had imaginary friends, and I'm like, yeah, that sounds kind of crazy, right? I'm like, imaginary friends. That's like somebody that you talk to because, I'm sure that, I don't know, if I can remember right, for Jaycee Dugard, I don't think she ever mentioned in her book about having any imaginary friends. Somebody that more likely that you can talk to while you were alone, that type of stuff, and then for the situation goes to where that mentions in her book about the stuff that makes 10 things that make her happy. It is, but let's just say if on the average though is knowing that I guess her imaginary friend could have been maybe the cat Eclipse or Tigger, or any pets like that more likely that could have been there for her, just thinking about them, like the family memories, that type of stuff. But on the other hand, the way I would think about though is like the type of imaginary friend that of course I've had for many years, and I can tell anybody here that that I kind of think it's kept maybe a little bit confidential, but on the other hand that I'm like, well, I can talk a little bit about it, is that knowing some people that may say it sounds kind of weird, but I had imaginary friends for a couple of years, and then they were there for me whenever I got upset. We talked, but then on the other hand too, that we're talking about that somebody that not everybody can see. If we're talking about an imaginary friend, if it's somebody that you can see, only you can see, but then not everybody else can see them. And sometimes it seems like that sometimes is kind of aggravating in life, of knowing about that if you're going to have an imaginary friend, somebody that stands by you, but then you're the only one who can see them, and then you talk to somebody else about them, and they think that you're crazy, that type of stuff. But let's just say though that with Diane Sawyer, that a real person. And the way I would think about though, an actual person, that one thing that I've been kind of looking forward to knowing about is like even something, maybe the grandparents, and then that maybe a few other family members and friends that they're like knowing about that, yeah, that that the person that you talk to, and we're not talking about Barney the dinosaur, we're talking about or any other those characters, we're talking about somebody who actually you talk to, and then knowing about by the time you actually meet them, if they're an actual person, and knowing about it's like the trusted relationship between these two. But on the other hand, that you have right here is an example right here of Diane Sawyer, and knowing what Diane Sawyer is, yeah, that like this. I could have maybe done a little bit more work with the picture, but anyway, but if this was right here, like she looks a little bit young, I'm sure that I don't know what she looks like. That I was able to look at a photo, from a magazine just to draw this. But let's just say that if this was Diane Sawyer right here, and knowing what Diane Sawyer is knowing about that, for like her trusted with her relationship, from her, from whenever she hosts on TV, that type of stuff, and knowing about, is she really considered maybe a best friend to Jaycee Dugard, and the way I think about though is that I'm sure that they had pretty much a connection, a companion, knowing about, sharing each other's stories and understanding about their story, that type of stuff, but on the other hand too, that knowing about, I'm like, yeah, that if the situation were to go further to where that you gotta tell them everything about your personal life, that type of stuff. But the way I would think about though is that knowing about that, I went ahead and have right here is like with a lock right here, and I'm sure with most of us is knowing about the story about Jaycee Dugard and Still Alive is knowing about from whenever she was a 5th grader, and when I think of Myers Elementary School, I guess is what she said that where she was going. But anyway, but I don't know if most of us can remember whenever we were in the 5th grade that knowing about for how far her education goes is that from whenever she was in the 5th grade to where if they were going to have it to where I know that they mentioned something about the class going on a field trip, but if you have right here is a lock right here, and knowing about that whenever you go into middle school, that a lot of times I'm like, you say that, what does a lock have anything to do with Jaycee Dugard's story? But I'm like, well, I just decided to add this because I have 3 of these locks, and knowing that one of them, each one of them has their own combination. But on your hand, that you have right here is a lock right here. If Jaycee Dugard had that, got that far to where she was able to learn, how to manage a locker combination, and knowing having her own locker, and for the most part is that knowing what technology nowadays is that anything that's shared on maybe social media sites between who she thinks that her friends are, and any other types of information such as online book sources, that type of stuff. But let's just say though that use right here as a lock as an example, but knowing about for a locker combination is like what the locker combination is knowing about what that understanding about that figuring out it's like how to unlock a lock, and knowing that for you have right here, if most of us remember that the locker combination you have right here is this right here, just say turn to the left and then to the right, one full turn, to the 2 full turns to the right, and then stop at a certain number, that type of stuff. But Jaycee Dugard had experience to where how it's like to unlock a lock, and knowing for most 5th graders that that's one thing I can remember whenever I was in the 5th grade, that would have been about the 1994, 95 whenever I was, but then I think that her story goes from 1991, but that they would tell on the 5th graders about giving them a tour to the middle school. If I can remember right, that the schools out there in it's like for out there at South Lake Tahoe that had to where that I'm not sure about between the 6th and 7th grade from if they start middle school around that time either, but on your hand, that knowing about like working on a locker combination is knowing that that's one thing that of course that they make sure that the students are familiar with whenever they move into the middle school, not really about maybe higher advanced calculators, but then on your hand too you're working a lock, and I can remember that I can tell anybody here that for those couple of times I had problems trying to use a lock, and a lock is like not only to keep your money safe, that type of stuff, the personal items safe, especially if you're managing it online. But let's just say that with the combination though, is a combination more easier than a username and password. But say that well, that all depends, huh? But all you have to do is just you got to create a username and password, but compared to a locker combination, the combination is provided for you. You just gotta memorize it. But on the hand, that knowing about anybody say, well, with the locker combination though, that it's more easier, it seems like, to memorize the date. Like for today's date, for today being Saturday, unless if it's Monday, if it's Monday morning, and knowing about that, yeah, that the day may be easier to memorize compared to the locker combination. But anyway, I have right here is a locker combination right there, and knowing about that with the locker combination, that whenever if we're moving into middle school, and knowing that they say that you would need to buy one of those, in which I know around this time of the year that you can buy one for about maybe less than $4, or say at the store. But anyway, you have right there is a locker combination. Anybody say that, I'm like, yeah, the combination, I'm like, yeah, but that on the hand too, that knowing about, for talking about, say, for Jaycee Dugard best friends though, is that knowing about that I also posted a video about locker combinations too as well on my YouTube page. But anyway, but knowing about the whole purpose about the trust relationship between friends though, is that knowing about these two connections. It's like between Diane Sawyer and then Jaycee Dugard right here, is knowing about that people that and trust, and then that you get along with them very well, and that really, I'm like, do you trust them with like anything such as, it's like any of your personal information, such as how well maybe you could be doing in school later on. And I can tell anybody here that knowing about that I know I was not an A+ student whenever I was going to school, but let's just say that on average though, that with most school students, is that if you're going to be going to school and you try to aim for the best grade, you try to aim for an A+, and on the other hand too, that knowing about sometimes it's like the score may vary. It's like talking about from stuff that maybe we don't understand whenever we're going to school, and knowing that for the most part is that really, I'm like, if I can remember right about Jaycee Dugard, if she mentioned in her book that maybe that's something that maybe she would have maybe mentioned later on about homework though, that hanging out with friends around people that she knew around South Lake Tahoe. But let's just say that that knowing about with homework though, that for if she was given homework, if I can remember right, I think in the 4th and 5th grade, I can remember having homework as well, and some of it was science class, and some of it was history class. But on the other hand, that I guess to say it's not like nowadays. It seems like with those educational programs that they even have on the computer, related software, that type of stuff. But let's just say that with Jaycee Dugard, say for best friends though, is knowing about somebody there who stands by your side, and knowing about, I'm like, if it's if we're talking about maybe a tutor, that knowing about that knowing that the whole purpose about if it's a story about a stolen life, such as a kidnapping story, or if it's lost and found, and if it's anything about learning a new skill, is that the whole purpose about, I'm like, really about that we may get that feeling to we're on our own, we're alone, well, you're on your own, you can take care of it, well, we can't help you, that type of stuff. And the whole purpose about with I guess say with true friends, with best friends though, is knowing about for people that we think that are considered best friends, is that whenever we begin a conversation though with somebody, it could be somebody who's around our age, between the age of 29 and 38, something like that, or maybe in their 40s, and knowing that they ask them information about you, such as that for Jay for JC, and Jaycee Dugard, and then you have right here is that for the letter J, like for J, for pine cones. But knowing about another activity I'm also working on too is like for typography, and knowing about with an A and then a Y and then a C that may have, like which calls like for diagrams, and knowing about the symbols too, that one of them that could represent for the crosses, and then for the stem, and then as well as for the as well as for the I or something like that. But on the hand too, that knowing about that that you have right here is that the E could more likely you know, like for the center, is that I can show others here. I'm like knowing about like for typography though, for like a graphic design lessons for typography, but have right here is, and then as well as the U, it's like for what's a simple could be found in the letter U, you know, that type of stuff. But it's like, and then for friend as well. But anyway, but talking about right here is like for best friends though, is it talking about is like for, you know, good, you know, for meetings for friends who are considered like, say, for trusted relationship, and knowing about that for like this trusted relationship right here is that knowing about the relationship for this, you know, for this trusted relationship, but knowing about, you know, people that you're pretty close to, and that knowing that like, yeah, if we're talking about maybe if it's an imaginary friend, or if it's just somebody that you know that you met, you maybe on a job or maybe in school, and just knowing about like, yeah, that that, you know, if you that somebody that cares a lot about you, and then you know, how well you're doing, you know, that type of stuff. And then the way I think about that, really, you know, do parents, I'm like, you do does you know, do parents or, you know, other, you know, family related, you know, do they count as well as like any references? I'm like, they say that, you know, yeah, that knowing about that the whole purpose about that we may think that, you know, just like during the story though, is that for whenever their life was stolen, is that knowing about that there's a lot of things that you lost, you know, from over the years, and knowing about, I'm sure that there are a few things that are still there, and knowing about that, yeah, somebody who cares about you, the privacy, and as well as knowing about, you know, getting to know that person very well, you know, that type of stuff. But if we were to look at these images right here, what I went and drew right here, knowing about, I'm like, yeah, that if, you know, these two people right here had the same eye color, and maybe you wear about the same makeup, and then knowing about, I'm like, you know, maybe you had wear the same jewelry, and, you know, as well, and then knowing about, I'm like, really, about, you know, are they considered best friends, even though if they maybe were, you know, hosted on, if they were on TV together, or if it was anything to do with that maybe that they met each other at a baby shower, or they may have met each other maybe at a maternity party or somewhere, some party, some gathering, you know, that type of stuff. And knowing about, I'm like, really, about the, you know, these two couples, that maybe if it's a group of four, that knowing about, I'm like, you know, the whole purpose about, if I can go ahead and make it like, you know, for sibling, you know, for you know, for triplets, you know, for triplets as an example, to where a group of 3 or 4 people who were born on the same day, and then knowing about that they like what's called kept their relationships forever, that they were like what's called best friends forever, you know, that type of stuff. But just knowing about if the situation were to be like, you know, for Jaycee Dugard though, is that if she met somebody from another country, like if I can remember right, what she talked about in the, you know, in their book about learning 2 different languages, and in that, you know, traveling around the world, you know, that type of stuff. So far as for good wins, it's like for chick, you know, good wins. But if we were to meet somebody maybe from Ireland or Israel, let's just say if we were to pick a country like Israel, if there was somebody who was born, you know, in Israel, and then they came to America just to meet, you know, the person, you know, who wrote the book about, it's like, you know, for the stolen life, and knowing about, I'm like, yeah, that they speak in their language here, and knowing about, you know, hey, that I like that, you know, make a, you know, take interest in you or something like that. So I could tell anybody here that knowing about, you know, people who are from other countries, you know, such as if it's Israel or China or somewhere like that, or Australia, you know, from other continents, you know, from overseas, is knowing about that that are they, you know, just because you have a few words with them and you have about something similar, such as this other person, you know, is only about maybe 10 years apart, you know, from you, such as that they're maybe a few years younger, see, a few years older than you, and knowing about, like for Jaycee Dugard, and knowing about that if you're going to be best friends with somebody, and then the next thing you know, it's like that you know, they help you with whatever, you know, understanding about the situation goes by, if it's, you know, any you know, sexual abuse or anything like that, and knowing about that, really about, you know, when the right time, to really share any type of personal information, knowing about one thing I would more likely suggest though is knowing about you. More likely, even though if the person asks, it's like even though if the person asks, they say it's never really a good idea, to share any information just because a person asks. Just because somebody asks, that don't mean that you have to tell them, and necessarily is it knowing about, oh my, really, that if it's anything to do with somebody that you know, but until you come to that point to where if you really trusted them, then on your hand too, it's like the whole meaning for for best friends though. So it's like in a lot of ways. So if we were to think about, I'm like, yeah, somebody there that says that that they're gonna help you with something, or keep something, or it's like protect something, that type of stuff, and knowing about that there ain't nothing on from the face of this earth that's going to harm this person, and knowing about somebody else who guides you and respects you, your privacy, that type of stuff. So I would encourage maybe any book readers, like children, and knowing about if they were to read the book, it's like for Jaycee Dugard and It's Still Alive, and knowing about like if it's a Monday or a Tuesday, or if it's on a weekend on a Saturday, is knowing about the whole meaning about it's like for for trust relationship with you talk about the story for Jaycee Dugard, like I say for best friends, is knowing about for what considers like for grade for like say for an A+, is knowing that if you have right here is like for Jaycee Dugard, which I went ahead and drew like say a little bit of red right there, but if I it's like for a little bit of work I could have maybe done for Diane Sawyer as well, for the image for Diane Sawyer, but anyway, but knowing about understanding about the whole purpose about for best friends though is like these a group of people that more likely that you can trust them with doing something for you and guiding you and respecting you, that type of stuff, and knowing about, I'm like, anybody say that, yeah, well, what do you call it whenever they break the trust? It's like you were best friends there for a while, and then after about 5 years, and then they go ahead and decide that they don't want to have a connection with you anymore, that type of stuff. So it's like knowing about that really, the things that more like that we can maybe look at that are required, such as that, with this person though, this person that wants to get into a conversation with you, such as that you kind of think it's personal, and as well as knowing about that with understanding about exactly about what the situation is knowing that somebody else that's willing to guide you and then help you out with whatever that's going on, and really, do we call friends? So it's like for best friends, somebody who may be doing stuff behind your back, that type of stuff, sharing information, and they may say that happens, but on your hand too, that knowing about with friends though is that people that are not related to you, and if we think that at some point in life to where that we think that they're taking advantage of you, and they're not, they may be helping you out a little bit, but then they say that they're going to meet you somewhere, or they're going to do something for you, that type of stuff, and then they don't do it, that type of stuff, and knowing about, I'm like, really, about if we're going to be in school, and then knowing about that the last thing we have to remember is somebody that we met, if it's from Israel, and thinking about that they came, that they may have lied to you at one time, and I say that, well, it's that knowing about really, if we were to get in that conversation to where that what's called a lie and what's called the truth, and knowing about that, if somebody were to say that they came to America. They came to America, to learn, how to use it. It's like the pronouns for like knowing about, like for the understanding about who wrote the book, and as well as knowing about for Jaycee Dugard, and knowing about, I'm like, yeah, that if somebody were to come to America, just to learn that how to speak, the word of language or something like that, and then that maybe if it's anything to do with maybe the pine cone charm, and knowing about, I'm like, yeah, that they don't know what a pine cone is, and then they come to America, and then they're like wondering, that, well, in my country that we don't call it pine cones, in my country that we call it silicon cones, so for pita cones, we call it pita cones, but on the hand too, that's like for pine cones, that is like if there's going to be somebody knowing about the trees out there, maybe parts of Israel, or if it's Ireland or somewhere like some country like that, to where that they have these like what's called these leaves and cones, like they say that they call them like pentecones or something like that. But on the hand, knowing about, I'm like, yeah, that if you were to meet somebody who's from another country, and that they don't maybe go by, say for Jaycee Dugard, their names may be pronounced something like for J, J-A-H, if like for Johai, if it's for Johai, if their name is pronounced such as for Johai Lucia, for Johai, if it's Johai Lucia, that they are from Israel, Johai Lucia, I guess if you could pronounce it, for Johai Lucia, that let's just say that from if they were from Spain or Ireland or England or maybe Israel, is knowing about people that you meet, other people, especially like on Facebook, and knowing about them, like that they look at your paper and they're like think about, want to know what it's like to be an American, and we read your book, it's like for from how your life was stolen, that type of stuff, and then they kind of want to take part and interest in knowing about exactly about your work. And for the most part is knowing about that for a whole part about the truth of the matter about best friends, though, is that knowing for most best friends, though, if we're going to be talking about, is like a story about, it's like for Jaycee Dugard, though, is that for people who are considered your best friends, is knowing about from how you're speaking, and that how your handwriting is. So, and anybody say that anybody with a 5th grade education, that their handwriting is not going to be that great. But I'm like, well, really, that we may be out of school for maybe 15 years, and we may say, I'm like, that they may write as best they could, knowing about, there may be some things that more likely that they do, and that it only takes within a matter of seconds, for them to help the doctor or somebody, to understand a little bit about them, such as that knowing about, anybody say that the way that they write the date may be just a little bit different, compared to everybody else. And the way I think about, though, that knowing to say for best friends is like, is to try not to be judgmental over everybody else, and like which I remember what she talked about in her books is like for Stolen Life, and knowing about picking up a ladybug and meeting somebody, maybe around the neighborhood, like around South Lake Tahoe, and talking to them, that type of stuff, and knowing about that if it's going to be a Johei Lucia or somebody else, and knowing about for like these friends, though, it's like if they're considered like your best friends, is that somebody who's going to help you with your math homework, that type of stuff, and then knowing about the whole trust relationship. But on the hand too, that knowing about for Jaycee Dugard, it's like for best friends, like top say for Diane, Sawyer, knowing about them like for what's required, and knowing about between the trust relationship between these two, or if it's 3 groups of 4 people, and knowing about it's like to kind of look at them and look at each other and think about that yep, that I guess the whole point about knowing about, if you think that for those many years that you thought that you were alone, well, I'll be standing by your side. If you think if you're having issues trying to understand something, such as if it's if it's school or on a job or anything like that, or if it's driving, that as you say, though, that well, you're on your own. Like, well, that's not all true either. Knowing about that there's somebody else. If it's going to be maybe if it's going to be an imaginary friend, what I also look at it is knowing about that just the way how the brain works, is knowing about that if you were to actually have the brain power to where you can communicate, talk to yourself about, knowing about like exactly, do you really want to do this? You got to think twice before you actually do something. But on the hand too, so I talk to say for Jaycee Dugard, best friends, and say talk to say color activity.